Modernization in banking is no longer a roadmap item, it's a defining capability. As customer expectations evolve, regulatory requirements also deepen and technology cycles accelerate. And banks are asked to evolve without ever stopping. Today, we're here with someone who sits right at the core of this evolution. I'm delighted to have AJ with us here today, who's the CIO at Standard Chartered Bank, one of the world's most leading banking institutions, especially in this dynamic market. Hi, AJ. How are you?
Hi, Minahil. I'm good. How are you doing?
I am good as well. Thank you so much for asking. AJ, so I did give a brief introduction of what you do, but could you go exactly a bit more into detail as to what you do at Standard Chartered?
So I joined the bank about 5.5 years ago. I started off at Standard Chartered Bank Sri Lanka then, and now I take care of technology as the CIO for Standard Chartered Pakistan. So anything in related to people's laptops, their applications, their infrastructure, their network, I'm the one to blame for.
That is a great way to describe it. But let's start with the big picture essentially. Um, why do you think bank modernization has essentially shifted from being a project to becoming a bank's operating model?
Okay. So uh, banks have really moved from what they used to be in terms of digital channels as well as payments. Um, at the same time, we still provide the same kind of products: current account, savings account, mortgages, personal loans. We even do end of day batch processing, month end reconciliations. We also do weekend maintenance windows. And sadly, these are things from our grandfather's era that has worked for banks and we are still doing. Where the branch actually opened at 9 a.m. in the morning, closed at 5 p.m., and everything they wrote in that manual ledger did not change till next day. But today, payments happen in milliseconds, right?
Hmm.
And banking, thanks to this, has become 24 by 7. So if you take client expectation as such, it's zero downtime, right? It's zero maintenance, it's zero reconciliations. And this is what we expect with things like Netflix, Google, WhatsApp, or Facebook. And meeting that expectation means that modernization is inevitable.
Great, great. So, would you say that banks these days are competing more with digital native platforms instead of other banks?
So, unfortunately, yes, right? So, when it comes to client experience, because at the end of the day, why do we do what we do? Right? It's for our clients, right? And client expectations have been given a new benchmark by the big tech giants, right? And when that benchmark is there, meeting that experience and expectation becomes a technology and an engineering challenge. And that's why people like me and also engineers who are listening in have to be more excited to be living today than earlier.
Right. So, keeping in mind how continuously in evolving the market is, right? Would you say that modernization is something that you can just plan and have it done at one particular moment, or do you think it's continuous, or it has to happen every day, every week, every month?
Okay, so I can call it evolution, right, instead of modernization, because evolution is a continuous process, right? And so is modernizing your technology infrastructure, your applications, or all of that as well, right? Um, so it's definitely not a project, it's not a program, or it's not a one time rodeo where you do a transformation and then that it's done, right? I think the banks who will succeed are the banks who have not done one just big transformation, but who has really built that right engineering culture, the mindset and the skill sets and the tool sets. Three things in that order, right? The mindset, skill sets, and the tool sets uh, in the DNA of their employees, so that this evolution or modernization, that we whatever we call it, is the default setting and it's not just a one time thing.
On that note, when we talk about legacy, right? Legacy systems, do you think legacy means the people and how they think, or does legacy essentially refer to the previous operating systems?
It's funny, because yeah, in life and in history, legacy is a good thing, right? But it can be good, but at the same time, it also creates a little bit of discomfort when evolution happens at a faster pace, right? So that's when we start calling evolution revolution, right? Then there's a little bit of discomfort that gets created. So when we say legacy, yes, it's not just your systems as such, right? So it's skills, it's your platforms, and it's also your processes. So if you take banks in particular, we invested a lot maybe 2 decades ago, right? When the hype and the emergence of digital channels, the mobile apps, and the digital payments and all of that. So we invested in infrastructure, we invested in people, we invested in platforms, and it worked and it has been growing, right? So, what happened over a period of these 2 decades is that we kept building layer after layer after layer in terms of infrastructure, in terms of integration, in terms of platforms, right? And now, when we look at this magnificent beast, uh, sometimes it becomes very difficult to start delayering it and to have that know how to delayer it the right way to really evolve.
Hmm.
Right? That's where we start terming it legacy, and it's very difficult with legacy systems and all of that. And I think getting that right is the most difficult things for CIOs or banks or whoever it is
Hmm.
today to really succeed
Hmm.
amidst what's happening.
Hmm. So, in your case, and speaking from your experience, why was it better to go for a layered approach instead of making all of those changes all at once?
So that was how we built our systems, right? Because the change in technology was not as rapid as it is today, right? And if you see, some of the banks still run on mainframe computers, right? Mainframe servers. And to be fair, those are very robust and they've served banks for more than one would expect, right? And it has still worked for us and it is still working for us, right? So it was natural for us to keep layering it on top of each one, right? But now it's a conscious decision where we start building modularity from scratch. So this is an afterthought that has come, and companies that are starting afresh, be it the tech-led startups and all that, they have that advantage where they are really building modularity in architecture and design, so that when they need to embed some emerging technology that is coming in, they can do it much more easily than having to rip out all of your core infrastructure or your systems and then trying to do it. So I think it's no one's fault that it was done. That is the natural way that it happened, just that it's a bigger challenge for people who have layered and done well over the past 2 decades to still be competitive. At the same time, needs to bring that agility into that magnificent beast, and that's why it becomes an interesting challenge.
Great. So on another note, when we talk about cloud, right? Um, how do you think clouds provide value to a bank, and where do they need to proceed with caution, and how?
Okay. So cloud, of course, has its obvious benefits, right, in terms of agility, scalability, elasticity, and these are well known. And maybe 5 years ago or so, all of us moved into these cloud first strategies, and we wrote cloud first documents, and we really assumed that cloud would be the magic pill that can reduce our cost and make us deliver things much faster to our clients. But now we are more mature in terms of understanding cloud and understanding how we really leverage cloud to create value. And what that maturity gives you is to understand, um, to make a conscious decision of when to move to cloud and when not to. So we call it as a cloud value framework, where we just don't blindly move anything to cloud, but we move to cloud where it makes sense. For example, if you have a client facing application and on average, say you have 100,000 logins a day,
Hmm.
and you launch a campaign and you're going to expect 20 million logins on that particular day for that campaign, right? Maybe you're giving something, an LFC giveaway or a ticket at Anfield or something like that, right? So in the earlier model, how do you do that, right? But today, thanks to cloud, you can really scale for that 20 million logins, right? You can spin up virtual machines, you can add pods, you can scale your clusters, and then scale back.
Hmm.
That's creating value, and that's an obvious use case, right? So this is where it again comes down to being an engineering decision
Hmm.
on when to move to cloud, especially also taking into consideration data residency, sovereignty in terms of control and compliance, what your regulators expect and what your clients trust. Yeah. So even as an organization, we are also going strong on a private cloud strategy where we still retain the control and compliance whilst we also have the cloud native functionalities so that we have that flexibility as well. So that choice of public cloud, private cloud is really contextual,
Hmm.
and that's where
Hmm.
it adds value.
So, keeping in mind the Pakistani market, and obviously there is a very extensive regulatory requirements list as well. What would you say should be the preferred approach for banks and cloud? Is a private model better for them or a hybrid one?
So certainly there is no, again, one solution fits all for this. But from a banks and Pakistan point of view, I think State Bank has been extremely progressive in the last few years. Uh, I think whilst the Ministry of IT was coming up with a cloud framework and all that, I think State Bank was very clear in putting out an outsourcing framework for cloud service providers that defines the guardrails for banks in terms of what can be taken to cloud. So I think that way, in terms of a dialogue, in terms of thought leadership, State Bank has really done well in the last few years. And now it has really become, the ball has now come on to the courts of the banks, right? So the banks really have to be able to meet those regulatory expectations and leverage on cloud. And are they ready to do that, right? So I think it comes to that. And there is a very clear framework on, you can even take things to public cloud as long it's non-material, and if it's material, you have to put those right guardrails in and then move it to cloud. And this is not specific to State Bank, it's all around, right? So more and more the regulators around the world are looking for resilience as well as how you demonstrate control and compliance,
Hmm.
right? So you need to be able to have that engineering discipline to know what you will keep in house, what you're going to keep on premise, what you're going to take a private cloud decision, and what is easy to move
Hmm.
into the public cloud.
Right. Um, so when you talk about the customer, essentially, they don't really understand what's happening to their data. They don't understand what's happening at the back end, right? So, in the midst of all of these technological advancements and changes, how have you managed to build and earn your customers' trust, essentially?
Yeah, so I'm not going to say that I'm successful in this, right? But then again, we try. Uh, uh, so when it comes to solutions, right, it's very easy to get attracted by the shiny new emerging technology that is out there. But every CIO or every technology person in an organization trying to implement it knows that what is difficult is executing it in a way that it still earns the trust of your regulators and the clients. What do you mean? What do I mean by earn the trust of our clients, right? It's not about throwing a language model in front of a client, right? When still there are language models that cannot generate an image with a person drawing with a left hand, or where it still makes mistakes in terms of how many R's are in a strawberry, right? Um, Putting out something that will really earn the trust of clients as well as the regulators is going to be the differentiating factor in terms of who does well in this race, right? And it becomes very, very important. And the only way that you do that is that architecturally you need to build something called observability by design.
Hmm.
Right. So when you say observability by design, it's about how you make it transparent and auditable, and you have the right parameters to identify when something is going wrong before the client even faces it,
Yeah.
and you're able to kind of rectify it, right? So when you have observability across your platforms by design, and then the modularity we spoke about earlier, so that is where we really focus on building trust through the solutions that we provide our clients, and in turn we earn the trust of our regulators as well. So that is a challenge. It's not about just throwing whatever the technology that is out there at our
Yeah.
clients. It's about, because once you lose trust, even as people, it's very hard to earn it back.
Yeah,
So
obviously.
so that's why we have to be absolutely cautious in how we approach this.
Do you think this somehow affects your team's ability to actually be creative or innovative with what you're doing with your systems?
So I think yes, because I would say that there is a big difference between what sort of use case you're working on, right? So if you're working on a financial institution use case, it deals with real client data and also money, which is precious, right? So you can't really experiment in production, right? Whereas if you're working on a slightly different use case that is more internal, that is more sales based, marketing based, HR based within your organization, you can be a bit more experimental as well,
Hmm.
right? So based on the use case that you're working, sometimes you have to sometimes pull creativity back
Hmm.
and put the right guardrails.
Hmm.
It is just like, scientists can really, experiment with everything on people, right? There are series and years of trials that you do before you release something to market. Whereas in some other use case, you might want to release it to market faster. And that really depends and becomes contextual as
Hmm.
well.
So, AJ, we discussed that you have around a decade and a half experience, right? Worth of experience. So, during all the time that you've been working, what would you say is a bigger challenge when it comes to transformation? Is it the people or is it the technology? Where have you struggled most?
Yeah, this is an interesting piece, right? Because transformation is not the talk, right? It's the actual value that you're able to create. And where organizations struggle is not to get a consultant, come up with a plan or come up with an idea, set up a transformation team. Those are the easy pieces, right? But really getting that execution is tough, because that has to tie to your business outcomes and really have to give you results. So even today, we see that we spend maybe about 70% of our investment of transformation. When I say investment, it's money, time, and effort, sometimes on the technology piece, and the rest on the people, the processes, and the change management. It really have to be the other way around, right? Because when you have to transform something that has been working in a certain way, and there was nothing wrong with it all these years, right, with something new to future proof it, it becomes a very difficult execution challenge, right? So today, as CIOs, it's not about just being creative and giving the next best idea for transformation. It's about getting that executed. It comes down to the three things that I spoke about earlier. Maybe I'll spend more time on it. So, mindset, skill sets, and tool sets in that order, right? So, how we are really able to invest behind having the right mindset and skill sets are important, because if not, your tools can't save you, right? And I really think that there is a lot we need to do to invest in change management, because transformation happens the best when it comes from within. What do I mean by within? When the teams who have been doing processes and using systems one way, the same teams start doing it a different way, that's when transformation is fastest. Someone coming from outside, consultants coming from outside, systems coming and replacing systems, people coming and replacing people, that doesn't really create transformation. Right? Of course, it can dislodge things and create something new, and times you might have to do it. But transformation comes from within, and that is where companies are really struggling. When I say companies, I'm talking about established companies, are really struggling in terms of getting results that transformation initiatives promised in their business case versus what they're tracking as business outcomes.
Hmm. So, AJ, I read somewhere just the other day that the role of a CIO has changed from being an implementer to an orchestrator of ecosystems. Has that been the case for you as well?
So, of course, right? So, I think no more is the CIO's role just to manage infrastructure, take care of what sort of desktops or laptops the employees use, what sort of servers, and what sort of backup and storage that runs in your data center. No. So today, when the CIO has a seat at the table, when I say table around the management team, it's about how the CIO can really embed all that we spoke about, right? In terms of the right architecture, the right technology, the right security principles by design in strategy and our products, right? And the CIOs who are able to successfully do that by having that seat at that table and build that by design at the core of developing our new products, our processes and strategies, they will really be successful in driving their organization towards the outcomes that technology can really give us, right? I think that way the role of the CIO has really, really changed. Gone are the days that, people just expect CIOs to take a requirement and deliver on it. But today they really look to the CIO to have conversations about creating value.
Hmm. On that note, AJ, what do you think that CIOs in the Pakistani market should prioritize and focus on over the course of, let's suppose, 3 to 5 years?
So I think from a Pakistan point of view, one thing that is going for the market is the human capital, right? Whereas many other markets are struggling with human capital, etc. Uh, so even with the AI boom and all of that, still it is going to be too expensive, at least in the recent future, to replace everything that a human does. Whilst AI debatably can do everything, it is not for everything, right? It has to be used where it really helps humans to leverage where they have limitations of cognitive and physical abilities, right? So when there are limitations, how it can be enhanced. So I think what we really need to be focusing on is channeling the human capital towards innovation and research. Because whilst this is a very, very big economy, whilst we are great in terms of potential, which is a very sad word, right? I think really focusing on an innovation and a research and development culture. So this takes not just working with the industry, but also working with the academia as well, is a big priority because there is a big youth bulge, right? 60% of the population less than the age of 30. I think the industries owe it to the generation because that generation can really uplift the way that the economy operates. And that economy has to be based on innovation, which is more sustainable and which can give exponential growth than, steady 3%, 4%, 5% growth, right? We've seen how innovation has changed economies in Southeast Asia and in East Asia. And I think that is something that we as a country should be really focusing on.
Well, you certainly touched a really great point. I feel like, especially keeping in mind Pakistan, we really need to work together from the academia level to the professional level and focus more on how we can reach that potential. That's the word that you used. This was a great, insightful discussion, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay. So it has been little more than 3 years for me in this country. And if it's one thing that has really stood out for me about Pakistan, and that's resilience, right? Because even daily life can be a fight, from getting electricity to water to gas to public transport to just going in the road without a protest being out there is a daily fight. And
That is-
despite all of that, this is a thriving economy and people are resilient, and that is what will take this country forward. So I've been extremely impressed with that skill, and I think that is going to take this country where it can go as well. So it has been an absolute pleasure, Minahil.
You
Thank you
too,
very
AJ.
much.
You too. Thank you for the compliment, AJ. Pakistanis are nothing but resilient. That is a fact for sure. Thank you for being a part of this podcast. I certainly learned a lot, and I'm hoping our audience did too. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next one.